Phillies on top.
But this club just does not die.
He's under it. He's got it. And the game is over. Hoskins swung on, did it, crushed, and the Phillies are going to lead it 4-0. Just a towering fly ball to straightaway left. Schwarber was ready. Bryce Harper has put the Phillies on top.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Phrankly Phils podcast here on the AAT Sports Network. I am your host, Adam Mack. Took a little break along with the All-Star break last week, but we are back here to talk a little fight into baseball. A lot has kind of happened in the last couple of weeks. Three big kind of storylines we're going to talk about. Trade deadline is in a few weeks, so we're going to talk about some candidates for the Phillies should target, which positions, which players, some names to keep an eye on. Secondly, we'll talk about the two big rumors that are floating around with the Phillies. Shohei Ohtani, Juan Soto to Philly. Is it true? My thoughts on it, what your thoughts should probably be. And finally, what we're going to start with tonight, kind of the bigger news, the actual realistic news of the team. Bryce Harper is expected to play first base at some point during the Milwaukee Brewers series, current series that the Phillies are on. We're going to kind of talk a little bit about that move. Is it the right move? What it kind of means for other people in this lineup, other people in the field, and what that means. So we're just going to dive right into it. Bryce Harper is moving to first base. Topper did say at some point this series we will see that move. He did not start there tonight. He started in the DH spot. Everyone is kind of normal positions for right now. Doesn't mean by the end of the game there's a defensive realignment and Harper's at first to end the game. Not really sure, but for the time being, Harper is DH tonight. With Derek Hall playing first. So let's kind of break this down, what this means if Bryce Harper were to move to first base. If Harper were to move to first base, ultimately the DH spot would be open. My guess is going to go to Kyle Schwarber. We all kind of know. We'll get a little bit deep into why Schwarber should not be in left field. Schwarber should only be the DH. By keeping up Harper at first, it would allow Alec Boehm to stay at third base, not flip-flop between third base and first base. And then finally, would allow some sort of combination of Brandon Marsh, Nick Castellanos, and Johan Rojas, Philly's 6th overall prospect who just made his MLB debut during the San Diego series, would allow him to be now the everyday outfielder for the Phillies. So let's kind of break it down by position. We're going to start out in the outfield with Johan Rojas. Formerly the 6th rated prospect for the Phillies, was called up during the San Diego series. In his first inning as a Philly, had an incredible catch up against the wall, threw the runner out at first, trying to get back on the play. Brilliant defensively. That's kind of why a lot of fans are buying into him, is he's one of, if not the best defensive prospects, not just in the Phillies, but in all of baseball. So we're really buying in. More than likely, I'm thinking Johan Rojas will stay in center field. Much quicker, very good defensively. That would allow Brandon Marsh to move over to left field. Again, Brandon Marsh, when we traded for him last year, was a defensive guy, some guy to lock down the center field position. Nothing against Brandon Marsh. I think he's an excellent center fielder. I think he will excel a little bit better in left field. He's not as quick as Rojas. Rojas is electric speed, great awareness. I still think if you put Marsh in left with his strong arm, Rojas in center with his quick speed, Castellanos is kind of come around as a good right fielder. I'm really going to solidify that center field, the whole entire outfield position. So right there, getting Schwarber out of left field now allows Rojas to be an everyday player, allows Marsh to move over to a position I think he's going to excel at a lot more in left field. And obviously you keep Nick Castellanos right where he is. All right, moving on. Third base, Alec Boehm. Obviously, he's done a pretty decent, good job as being the first base for the Philly. Nothing exciting, nothing great. Made some errors here and there. Going to kind of expect that from a guy that's really isn't a first baseman. We all kind of know the player Alec Boehm is. He's a solid player. Great defensively. Really kind of coming around a lot more offensively. But ultimately, he's come a long way as a third baseman. He used to be a very big hindrance at third. I think he's finally come around to be a legitimate future third baseman for the Phillies. So keeping Bohm at third, not flip-flopping, I think is going to do a lot better for his development as a third baseman. I think we're only going to see his progression and his skill continue to progress. So keeping him at third base every day, not having him flip-flop, really gives him an opportunity to focus. Schwarber, all the fans have been saying this. Nothing against his hitting. It's all about his fielding is the big hindrance for him. He's extremely slow. He has a real hard time, running after pop flies, ground outs, things like that. Ultimately, he's not a left fielder. He's been in left field mainly because of Harper's injury, Harper not being able to play the field. But we all know Kyle Schwarber is a designated hitter. He's not a fielder. He does not have the athleticism to really be out in left field. And he's truly just a giant hindrance for the Phillies out in left field. So getting Schwarber out of the field, I think is going to do wonders for the team. It really will allow to bring Marsh, who's an excellent fielder, into a position that we've struggled at. And now allows Rojas, who's an excellent center fielder and a real bright future for the Phillies, to now be the everyday player and really get the buy-in to this team. So all those moves really make sense. Now we'll talk about the big one, the real reason why all these moves are probably going to occur. It's Bryce Harper to first base. Never played first base in his career. Played a little bit in high school, nothing crazy. But there's a video of him today taking ground balls at first. Ultimately, what's going to come down to, with Harper at first, we need to keep Harper's bat in the lineup. We need to keep the bat in the lineup. We need to put the best possible lineup out there if we want to make another run at the World Series. This is the opportunity to make that the best run we could think of. So let's break it down just ever so slightly. With Harper at first, he's been training. It's not something he's picking up out of nowhere. He has been taking ground balls, fielding ground balls, throwing a second, things like that. And he has looked very, very solid. Now, I'm sure in game time, it's going to look a lot different. But for right now, truthfully, it can't get much worse at first base. We all kind of know Derek Hall has kind of now stepped into more of a everyday first baseman. He's not a great first baseman right now. He's a question mark fielding wise, not really great speed, and ultimately his bat's just not ready. So Derek Hall right now, I think we've rushed his progression just a little bit too much in his development. Ultimately, he's not the first baseman of this future. He's not the first baseman of a World Series caliber team. And I don't see Derek Hall being the first baseman long term. Ultimately, I don't think Bryce Harper can get worse than him. There's a lot of question marks. Is he going to even be good? Is this a mistake? But ultimately, I can't see this move being a mistake, as it now gives everyone the opportunity to play a position that they're much stronger in. But the real reason being Kyle Schwarber can now move out of left field and go to the DH spot. I think this is probably the biggest move for all of this, and the move that's going to really take the team to the next level. So Bryce Harper's at first. I love the move. I think it's the best thing that the Phillies could do right now. Hopefully long term, just a sign. I don't think Schwarber is going to stay on this team past this year, ultimately, just because of, the liability he could be. Ultimately, the Phillies have a lot of designated hitters on this team right now with Schwarber, Harper, Castellanos, three guys that all would succeed much better if they were just a DH. But right now, we had to play Castellanos on right. We have to play Harper at first, and we have to play Schwarber at left. Really what it comes down to is Schwarber can't be a fielder. He isn't athletic. He has no speed. He has really no awareness in the field. It's a giant liability to keep him in left field right now. So I think keeping him out of there is going to be a much better idea for the Phillies, and it will really take this team to the next level. Kind of looking at it now, it allows Derek Hall also to go down to AAA, keep getting development ready. He's just not ready for the big leagues. He truthfully doesn't look like he's going to be ready for a while. Some guy I really think his development was rushed through this, and Phillies have a giant hole at first base. But just really, the whole issue with the first base proves just one thing, that Philly fans, it shows you how valuable Rhys Hoskins is to this team. Everyone has obviously been frustrated with Hoskins over the years, but we're missing the 30 home runs out of him. Yes, he wasn't the greatest first baseman, but he did make a lot of great plays. Everyone wants to harp on him for his errors that he makes at first base. But ultimately, this whole scenario just really shows you how much Rhys Hoskins means to this lineup. So with Harper going to first, I love the move. I think it's the best move for the team. It's going to allow everyone to play their positions they're most comfortable with and where they can succeed the most. So Harper to first base, best move the Phillies could have done for this season. I'm really looking forward to what they can do in the rest of the way. So we're going to move on to the next thing. Obviously, the trade deadline just less than 2 weeks away, around 2 weeks away. Phillies are going to be buyers at this year's deadline, but where are they going to look for? We're going to look in left for corner outfielders. We're going to look for a first base. We're going to look for relief starting pitchers. There's a lot of different question marks with this team right now. So I'm going to throw out a few different areas. I still don't think the Phillies are done. I think when it comes to outfield, I love Johan Rojas. Ultimately, I don't think he's going to be on the Phillies long term for this season. I think they're going to move him back down to AAA, let that development keep going, find a rental for this year, and then they'll be able to move him back up to the MLB to start the 2024 season. But I want to throw out some few names. Some guys I do think are going to be on the move this this trade deadline, and some guys I think the Phillies should look after. So I'm going to start with my top candidate for the trade deadline this year. It's going to be Cody Bellinger from the Cubs. He's on a 1-year deal. Chicago. Chicago's pretty much fallen out of playoff contention once again. They're not going to be making the playoffs. There should be sellers, especially with an expiring contract like Bellinger's. I think making that trade, getting some prospects back for Chicago would be a smart move for them. So Cody Bellinger is a guy to keep an eye out. I cannot see a situation where he stays in Chicago to end the season. I think he's going to be moved at this year's deadline. So Cody Bellinger is a guy I really think is going to be moved. He's doing really, really well this year. Batting is a slash line of 305, 362, 531, 139 OPS with 13 doubles, 12 home runs, 35 RBIs, and 11 steals this year. Solid defender. Really, really solid defender that we can add into this lineup. And a big thing, he's a veteran presence. He has the championship experience. They won it with the Dodgers, former MVP. I think we'll do a really good job for this team. I really don't think the asking price for Chicago is going to be that much, especially since it's on an expiring contract and with Chicago being so far out of it. So if we're able to do that, I think Marshall would go to center. Bellinger would stay in left, vice versa. But I think getting Bellinger into the lineup, getting Bellinger into the field, we're adding one of the better defenders in this year's trade deadline, and we're adding a former MVP with championship experience. Really think will help this lineup in the clubhouse atmosphere. Not saying the clubhouse atmosphere is bad, but I think adding in more of a championship mentality to this clubhouse can't do this team wrong. So Cody Bellinger is a guy to keep an eye out. A couple more guys. Is Tommy Pham of the New York Mets, division making a trade with inside the division, not very heard of. I know it's not going to make Philly fans easy. I think it might be a little bit tougher since it is a division rival, and the Mets aren't necessarily out of it. But 1-year deal, same thing, expiring with the Mets. Mets probably won't re-sign him. He's 35. He's a slash line 349, 387, 640. 7 doubles, 6 home runs, 18 RBIs, and 93 plate appearances in June. I think ultimately it's a rental bat. That's all he's going to be. I think he's an excellent rental bat. He hits home runs. He averages about 15 to 20 home runs a season. He's a really good power bat who has the ability to hit for contact as well. So he's not a guy that the Mets have said they're going to move. But like I said, he's on a 1-year deal. He's pretty much going to be a rental bat. If the Mets keep continuing to Met, I cannot see them being buyers at this year's deadline. They should be sellers. And I think selling and trading Tommy Pham would be an excellent move for the team. So Tommy Pham's a guy to keep an eye on right now for the team. But another guy I want to kind of talk to you about is actually a pitcher. We're going to go Carlos Carrasco. Same thing with the Mets. Kind of bring him home. Former Philly prospect, obviously went to the Indians in the Cliff Lee deal back in 2009. Now is with the New York Mets. I think it's getting a veteran pitcher on that. I really love what Christopher Sanchez has done. This is the move. The move I don't think the Phillies are going to make is for a 5th starter. I think they found the answer in Christopher Sanchez, but the Phillies are very weak at starting pitching when it comes to depth. So if a player does go down and the Phillies do need a pitcher, I think we are screwed. So I think if the Phillies are smart, Dave Dombrowski is foreseeing a possible scenario, adding a a sixth starter into the mix would do wonders for this team, would allow Christopher Sanchez to kind of come out of the bullpen, could have Christopher Sanchez and a guy like Carlos Carrasco, Mike Clevenger, Jordan Montgomery, the St. Louis Cardinals, give them an opportunity to take 3 or 4 innings each, not go deep into the bullpen for these bullpen games that they like to do. So I think getting a sixth starter into the mix, if for reasons someone does go down, it does give them Phillies some depth at the pitching position. I don't feel Christopher Sanchez has lost the ability to be the fifth starter. I think he's earned it. He's shown he's a quality fifth starter for the Phillies. He's had some really decent starts. Taijuan Walker's coming around. Suarez, we all know what they can do. And I think that 5 starting pitcher is solid. However, it would be nice to get some more pitching depth in this team because if for some awful reason somebody goes down, we've seen what the Phillies can do with 4 pitchers. We see what happens every 5th game with that bullpen game. It's an automatic loss. So I think adding a 6th pitcher into the mix would do wonders for this team. Allow Christopher Sanchez to come out of the bullpen, could move Christopher Sanchez back down to AAA to get more consistent starts. I think getting a 5th starter is smart. Looking long-term for this team this season would allow some more depth, would allow the Phillies to, have some flexibility. If someone were to struggle, go down on the IL for 15 days, would give the Phillies a lot of leeway, a lot of things to play with. So keep an eye on a six starter, Carlos Carrasco, Mike Clevenger, Jordan Montgomery, not these great pitchers. If the Phillies are going after, an automatic starter, Shane Bieber of the Cleveland Guardians is an option. With Cleveland being in playoff contention, not sure if the move is going to happen, but could be a move if Cleveland starts to tank a little bit. Two last pictures that could be on the move, should be on the Phillies radar. Max Scherzer of the Mets, obviously future Hall of Famer, not that Cy Young caliber pitcher he's always been the last decade, but would be a solid addition to this rotation. Again, just for a depth piece. And then kind of the last one to look at, Eduardo Rodriguez of the Detroit Tigers, 2.13 ERA over 11 starts. Would add a lefty to go alongside Ranger Suarez. Could be another move. I think everyone is going to be hyped up on Eduardo Rodriguez. He has, again, World Series experience with the Red Sox. Doing pretty decent right now with the Tigers. So I think that's a move to keep an eye on. That the asking price for Rodriguez might be a little bit high with, him being one of the better, if not best, pitching prospect players on this year's trade market deadline. So keep an eye on those bunch of guys. But ultimately, the 2 positions I think the Phillies are going to go after, corner outfield, would allow Johan Rojas go back to AAA, continue his development, and a 6th starter that would really kind of give the Phillies some leeway. When it comes to the bullpen, unless somebody goes down, I know Sir Anthony, Jose Alvarado have kind of been battling injuries, but when the Phillies are at full strength with this bullpen, they have been really, really solid. They have a lot of great pieces with Craig Kimbrell, Gregory Soto, Matt Strom, Jose Alvarado, Sir Anthony Dominguez. I don't see the Phillies getting any more help in the bullpen. They could go after David Robertson for the 3rd freaking time. They could get a guy like Brad Hand, bring guys that they have experience, who have experience with the Phillies, know the clubhouse very well, and would do really good additions to the bullpen. Again, I see the bullpen as being the 3rd priority on the list behind corner outfielder, starting pitching, and relief pitcher. So I don't foresee that happening. But we're going to close the show with kind of talking about the big 2 prospects that everyone's been kind of getting excited over. And that is Juan Soto and Shohei Ohtani, both impending free agents at the end of the season. A lot of people want the odds for Philly to get either one of them are fairly high. Easily, I think last time I checked the Vegas odds, the Phillies were at least top 3 in the Shohei Ohtani sweepstakes and top 5 in the Juan Soto sweepstakes. So, obviously Shohei Ohtani is the best player in the game right now. 2-way player, you can go on about how great he is. Juan Soto, one of the young stars in this league right now. So we're going to break it down one after the other. Should the Phillies go after him at these year's trade deadline? When it comes to the deadline this year, I say no to both. I think the asking prices are going to be absolutely way too high. Look at San Diego, the Angels, what they want for Shohei Ohtani is 2 to 3 top 100 prospects plus 2 to 3 MLB ready players. So looking at that, top 100 prospects, Phillies have 3 of them: Mick Abel, Andrew Painter, and Justin Crawford. All 3 of those would have to go. Everyday players would have to be Alec Bohm, Bryson Stott, or Brandon Marsh, guys like that. Ultimately, I think the Phillies would give up way too much for a rental of Shohei Ohtani, would really salvage our whole future. I don't think that's the move. When it comes to the offseason, it's going to be a bidding war. Whoever's going to offer the $400 million contract is going to get Shohei Ohtani. Now, would I absolutely love to add him into our lineup? Absolutely. Do wonders. He's the best player in the game. Absolutely would love the best player in the game. But ultimately, I think the asking price at the deadline is going to be way too much. When it comes to Juan Soto to the Phillies, looking at what San Diego had to give up last trade deadline to sign him, they got they had to give up their top 2 prospects to send to Washington. They gave up about 5 different guys, both between prospects and MLB ready. Ultimately, the San Diego would be foolish not to ask for the same thing in return. That would require Abel, Painter, Crawford, De La Cruz, guys like that to be part of the trade. Then you include guys like Bryson Stott, Alec Bohm. I don't think that trade is worth it. Now, come off season, I would be intrigued to see if the Phillies go after him. Would be an interesting move. Not overly excited. I'm not overly excited and pumped about Juan Soto as most people are. I think he's a little tad overrated for what we think he's at. Had the great season during the World Series run in 2019 with Washington, but ultimately he disappears from me in a lot of big crucial scenarios. Was pretty on. He had 2 home runs in the NLCS, but ultimately didn't make a lot of great defensive plays. Besides those 2 home runs, we weren't really talking much about him other than the fact that he was traded there at the deadline and he had that run with Washington. So looking at Juan Soto, I'm not overly excited on him. Now, would I welcome him to the Phillies on a pretty good deal? Absolutely. But if the deal's not too high or it's a bidding war, I'm happy to pass on him just because I don't feel like he's as good as people make him out to be. He's probably going to still sign a giant contract this offseason, but ultimately, I'm not as hyped on Juan Soto as I am about most other players. So ultimately, when it comes to the deadline, love to add Shohei Ohtani into the mix. Would love to add the best player in baseball, but I don't see it happening this year. So probably not this offseason. We'll see what happens. I would love to add him to the mix then. Pay him whatever you want. He's the best player in baseball right now. When it comes to Juan Soto, I'm cool to just pass on him. I think he's overrated. Not a huge fan of him. Doesn't seem like the greatest guy in the clubhouse. So we're going to pass on him, in my opinion. But a lot of good guys in the Phillies trade market this year. It's going to suck for some of the prospects I've been really excited for. Got the chance to watch throughout the season, but ultimately it's a business, and we want to win another World Series. So a bunch of guys to keep on the trade deadline for the Phillies to target: Cody Bellinger, Mike Clevenger, Mike Carlos Carrasco, Tommy Pham, bunch of different guys the Phillies should target. So keep an eye out for all those. Obviously, let's get excited for Bryce Harper's debut at first base. That's tonight, tomorrow, the day after. But we got a lot of great show. Make sure on Sundays you tune into the Max Miners Report. We report on the Phillies farm system, what's going on from rookie ball all the way up to AAA. We got a lot of big news coming on. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to everything. I'm Adam Mack, and we'll see you all next week.